Boys and girls, I hope you've been getting outside and singing, doing some running around, spending some good time with your family. For today's Bible story, for it to really make sense, you have to keep in mind a couple of things. Remember, we talked about how there's not really police or anything like that. So you kind of want to be joined either to a pretty strong city or to a fairly strong family that could then take care of you. So Lot, he was Abram's nephew. So they were family together. They were supposed to work together, support each other, and Abram was supposed to be in charge of Lot. Also back then, you were always supposed to be very respectful to older people. Now, of course, we still have that rule today, but back then it was even more important. Well, Lot and Abram, when they left Egypt, they went again to the place where they had had an altar before and offered sacrifice before, and they did that again. And then they continued to live in that area. And as they continued living in that area, they were rich, and rich back then didn't mean so much money as it would mean lots of sheep, lots of goats, lots of donkeys, and they had their men who would help to take care of the sheep and the goats, all of their herders, the shepherds who took care of those animals. Well, when you look at the area where they lived, you can see here, there's not a lot to eat, and there's not a lot to drink. So they would have to move around a lot to try to find places where they could find food and drink. And after a while, Abram's shepherds and Lot's shepherds started to argue with each other about who was getting the best grass. Now, of course, Abram's shepherds should be allowed to always get the best grass because Abram is older, Abram is in charge. But Abram's also supposed to be taking care of Lot and Lot's things. So Lot's shepherds would be arguing back that they weren't getting their fair share. They were arguing a lot. And Abram knew about it and was really rather uncomfortable with it. And so he finally called Lot over and talked to him. And he said, "We are relatives. We're family. We shouldn't be fighting like this. Let's agree to separate. You go one direction and I'll go the other direction." Now, sometimes back then that would happen. When you had really large, successful families, usually what happened is the two sides started fighting, and they fought a battle, and one took another, and one took one side, and the other took the other side. But this time, instead of fighting a battle, they're just going to talk about it and agree. So Abram said, "You pick. If you choose to go that way, I'll go this way. If you choose to go this way, I'll go that way." Now, right away, anybody reading this story way back then would know, whoa, this is all kinds of inside out and backward, because you always let the older, more important person decide first. That should be Abram deciding first. And here's Abram letting Lot decide first. That's ridiculous. We're going to talk tomorrow about a reason I think Abram might have let Lot decide first. Well, Lot looked around, and of course he saw over there. That was a valley with a river, lots of water. There were plants and trees and nice cities, not so big like Ur and Haran where they left, but still nice cities with lots of people in them where they would be comfortable and have friends. There would be things to do. There would be all sorts of different interesting things sold in the market that they could have. It would almost be like being back in Haran if he were over there. Lot went ahead and chose the nicer spot. Now again, the people who lived back then, they would have been horrified at what Lot had done. That was showing, for them, he was a pretty bad guy. He was not just disrespectful, he chose to do wrong things, and he was selfish, is what a lot of people back then would have been thinking. In fact, to a lot of people back then, it would have been fine for Abram to kill Lot as punishment for not being more respectful to Abram. But Abram didn't say anything. He just let Lot go, and Lot took his family and his servants and his things to the beautiful towns. The Bible said they were well watered, just like the garden of the Lord. Abram went ahead to the other place. Not much water, not many plants, pretty brown and dry and hills and rocks. And he went to this area and brought his people and his things to this area. And God spoke to him. Remember, we talked about a covenant, an extra special promise. And God said to Abram, come up here onto this mountain. And I want you to look around. I want you to look to the east, look to the west, look to the north, look to the south. All this land that you see, I will give it to you and your children after you. Remember, back then, that was the big thing. You wanted your children for years after you to be successful. God said, I will do that for you. You follow me, you be my example, and I'll give you all this land. Not only that, your children, remember Abram and Sarai, they couldn't have any children. They didn't have any. He said, you will have children, and they will be so many, it will be like the dust of the earth. Can you imagine if you picked up some dry, dusty ground and you let it sprinkle down through your hands? Or maybe sand on the beach, scooped it up and let it sprinkle down through your hand. All the little bits of dirt and the pieces of sand. You've been in the classroom and seen the dust floating in the air. God said to Abram, you have no children now. You don't have any land that even belongs to you now. But I will end up giving to you and your children everything you see here, and you'll end up with more children than the dust of the earth. We know over and over in the Bible, God makes promises to Abram like this, and Abram goes ahead and trusts God, follows and does what he says. So, boys and girls, you can see here some of the things from this story. Abram and Lot's shepherds arguing together. Lot deciding to go over to the very nice cities, and Abram taking the part that wasn't so nice. Go ahead and draw some pictures from today's story in your Bible journal. Look back through some of what you've done. We just have one more day of Bible stories at home, and then we'll be back at school. We'll be having chapel on Friday, and then hopefully we'll all be back in school to do our stories there.